On a frigid February afternoon in 2025, Delta Connection Flight 4819 taxied onto the runway at Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, its engines humming steadily against the howling winter winds. To the 76 passengers and 4 crew members aboard the Bombardier CRJ-900LR, it was supposed to be nothing more than a routine journey, a short, uneventful hop to Toronto Pearson International Airport. But fate had other plans. What began as an ordinary flight would soon unravel into a harrowing ordeal of chaos, fire, and survival. As the aircraft soared through the overcast sky, no one on board could have predicted the disaster that awaited them upon landing. In just a matter of moments, a perfect storm of unforgiving weather, technical failure, and human limitations would push the aircraft past its breaking point, setting the stage for a catastrophe that would test the limits of human endurance and aviation safety. The preliminary investigation determined that the aircraft experienced a hard landing that caused a landing gear component to fracture, leading to its collapse and the plane overturning on the runway. The aircraft is a Bombardier CRJ-900 regional jet aircraft operated by Endeavour Air, a wholly owned subsidiary of Delta Air Lines. The flight had 80 people on board, 76 passengers, and 4 crew members. While all occupants survived, 21 sustained injuries. Do you want a deep dive into the investigation, technical aspects of the crash, passenger experiences, or aviation safety measures? Let's dive in. The flight and crew. The aircraft, a 16-year-old Bombardier CRJ-900LR, registered as N932XJ, was a workhorse of regional aviation, designed for short to medium-haul flights. It had been consistently maintained and had logged thousands of successful flights before the ill-fated journey. With a maximum seating capacity of 76 passengers, the CRJ-900LR was well-suited for regional travel, offering a balance of fuel efficiency and performance. It was powered by 2 General Electric CF34-8C5 engines, known for their reliability, but like any aircraft, it was dependent on the skill and judgment of its crew. The captain, a seasoned pilot who initially joined Mesaba Airlines in October 2007 before transitioning to Endeavour Air, had accumulated a total of 3,570 flight hours. Of these, 764 hours were specifically on the CRJ series aircraft, making him familiar with the plane's systems and handling characteristics. However, his recent hands-on experience in actual flight operations was significantly limited. Having primarily worked as a simulator instructor for new pilots in recent years, he had logged only 3.5 hours of actual flight time in the previous 30 days. This raised concerns about his ability to respond to in-flight challenges with the same reflexes and situational awareness as a more active flying captain. Despite this, he was highly regarded for his technical knowledge and instructional expertise. The first officer, in contrast, was relatively newer to commercial aviation. She joined Endeavour Air in January 2024, completing her rigorous training in April of the same year. Since then, she has been actively flying for the airline, steadily building her experience. By the time of the accident flight, she had accrued 1,422 total flight hours, with 418.7 of those hours on CRJ series aircraft. While she was still in the earlier stages of her career, her recent experience in active flying meant she had more hands on flight time than the captain in the preceding month. Her performance as a first officer had been described as competent, though she had not yet encountered extreme weather conditions in a critical phase of flight. For this flight, she was designated as the pilot flying PF, meaning she was responsible for manually controlling the aircraft during takeoff, flight, and landing. The captain, serving as the pilot monitoring PM, was tasked with overseeing the flight, handling communications, and intervening if necessary. This division of duties was standard in commercial aviation and intended to ensure proper workload management and situational awareness. Despite their differing levels of recent flight activity, both pilots were well trained and fully certified under FAA regulations. However, their ability to work together effectively in a high-stress situation would later be scrutinized as a contributing factor to the crash. The balance between the first officer's active but limited experience and the captain's extensive knowledge but reduced recent hands on flying time created a dynamic that, under normal circumstances, might not have posed an issue. However, when faced with deteriorating weather and a rapidly developing landing scenario, their coordination and decision-making would be put to the ultimate test. Departure and initial flight phases. At approximately 11:45 a.m. Central Standard Time, Delta Connection Flight 4819 departed from Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport under mostly clear skies. The aircraft climbed steadily to its assigned cruising altitude of 33,000 feet. The first officer handled the controls confidently, and the flight proceeded uneventfully for the majority of its route across the Midwestern United States and into Canadian airspace. As the CRJ-900 approached Toronto, however, the weather conditions deteriorated rapidly. A winter storm had left behind a treacherous mix of ice and snow, with winds gusting at speeds of up to 40 miles per hour, 64 kilometers per hour. Snowfall reduced visibility, and the runways at Toronto Pearson International Airport were being actively cleared by ground crews. The Air Traffic Control Tower advised incoming pilots of challenging conditions but continued allowing landings on runway 23, the fateful landing. At precisely 2:13 p.m. local time, the CRJ-900 descended toward the runway, its fuselage buffeted by turbulent air currents. The cockpit was filled with a tense atmosphere as the pilots focused on their instruments and the rapidly approaching tarmac. Outside, strong crosswinds gusted unpredictably, adding to the challenge of an already precarious approach. Just 2.6 seconds before touchdown, the aircraft's Enhanced Ground Proximity Warning System EGPWS blared a sharp and urgent warning. Sink rate, sink rate. The alert indicated that the aircraft was descending too rapidly, a clear sign of an unstable approach. The pilots had mere moments to react, but their options were limited. The CRJ-900 was moving at 136 knots, dangerously below the recommended approach speed of 144 knots. Simultaneously, its vertical speed had surged to 1,100 feet per minute, far exceeding the 720 feet per minute threshold that the landing gear was structurally designed to withstand. As the aircraft made contact with the runway, the excessive vertical speed and reduced airspeed placed an immense amount of force on the landing gear. The impact was immediate and catastrophic. The right main landing gear bore the brunt of the force, and within milliseconds, a critical structural component fractured under the strain. This failure set off a disastrous chain reaction. The weakened landing gear collapsed inward, causing the entire right wing to bear an unnatural load. With the structural integrity compromised, the right wing detached at its root, severing vital fuel lines. A torrent of highly volatile jet fuel sprayed outward, meeting the scorching hot surface of the aircraft's engine components. Within moments, the fuel ignited into a violent fireball, engulfing the wing in a raging inferno. The cabin, still intact for now, was filled with screams of terror as flames spread rapidly. The aircraft, now crippled and out of control, began to veer violently to the right. Without the stability of its right wing, it skidded uncontrollably across the tarmac, sparks and debris scattering in all directions. The nose pitched downward as the fuselage twisted, unable to maintain balance. Then, in a horrific final motion, the aircraft flipped upside down, slamming onto the runway with bone-jarring force. Now fully inverted, the CRJ-900 came to a fiery halt, its once sleek frame engulfed in flames and thick black smoke. The airport's emergency response teams were already mobilizing, but with every passing second, the fire grew more intense, threatening to consume what remained of the aircraft and its passengers. The disaster had unfolded in mere moments, but its consequences would last far longer. Chaos and courage. Inside the cabin, chaos erupted as the impact left passengers dangling from their seatbelts, their world turned upside down. The once familiar interior was now an eerie, smoke-filled maze, illuminated by the flickering glow of fire outside. Overhead compartments had burst open, raining luggage, debris, and even oxygen masks onto the disoriented travelers. Cries of panic filled the air as passengers struggled to comprehend what had just happened. Despite the disarray, the flight attendants, trained for life or death situations, leaped into action. Battling both the thickening smoke and the disoriented screams, they barked firm yet reassuring commands, guiding passengers to remain calm and locate the exits. The aircraft's inverted position turned a standard evacuation into a nightmare. Some passengers fumbled frantically with their seatbelts, struggling to release themselves, while others fell painfully onto the ceiling-turned floor the moment they were unlatched. Those who could move scrambled to assist others, pulling stunned passengers to their feet and helping those injured in the chaotic descent. The emergency exits, now situated awkwardly above them, required a coordinated effort to open. One flight attendant, using pure adrenaline, climbed up onto a row of seats, reaching for the nearest door. With a forceful push, it gave way, allowing a rush of fresh air to replace the suffocating smoke. Outside, flames licked hungrily at the fuselage, creeping dangerously close to the cabin. Emergency responders, already on the scene, raced against time to douse the fire and assist survivors. With the exits open, passengers began to crawl, jump, or be lifted out of the wreckage. Some hesitated, frozen in shock, until the crew and fellow passengers physically pulled them to safety. Miraculously, all 80 individuals on board made it out alive, a testament to both trained preparedness and human resilience. Paramedics swiftly tended to the injured, many of whom bore lacerations, bruises, and sprains from the rough impact and frantic escape. In total, 21 people were hospitalized, with injuries ranging from back sprains to head wounds, but incredibly, not a single life was lost. As the last survivor was pulled from the wreckage and the flames were finally subdued, one undeniable truth remained amidst the terror. There had been courage, investigation, and findings. The Transportation Safety Board of Canada, TSB, wasted no time in launching a full-scale investigation into the catastrophic landing. Investigators arrived at the scene within hours, sifting through the charred wreckage for critical evidence. Among the first items recovered were the cockpit voice recorder, CVR, and flight data recorder, FDR, often referred to as the aircraft's black boxes. These devices held the key to understanding the final moments before impact. As forensic teams analyzed the data, preliminary findings pointed to a combination of excessive descent rate, reduced airspeed, and turbulent wind conditions as primary contributors to the accident. The aircraft had been descending far too rapidly at 1,100 feet per minute, well beyond the structural limits of the landing gear. At the same time, its airspeed had dropped to 136 knots, below the 144-knot target for a stabilized approach. The presence of gusty crosswinds further destabilized the aircraft's trajectory, leaving little room for corrective action in the crucial moments before touchdown. The investigation identified the right main landing gear failure as the initiating event in the chain reaction that led to the aircraft's structural disintegration and post-impact fire. Engineering analysis confirmed that the landing gear collapsed under excessive stress, causing a catastrophic fracture in a key load-bearing component. This structural failure, in turn, led to the detachment of the right wing, severing fuel lines and exposing jet fuel to the engine's hot surfaces, an instant ignition source. Beyond the mechanical factors, the TSB's report raised concerns about pilot experience. While the crew met all regulatory requirements, the captain had limited recent flight hours in real-world conditions, having spent most of his recent training in a simulator environment. This lack of hands-on flight experience may have contributed to the inability to recognize and correct the unstable approach in time. As investigators pieced together the final sequence of events, the findings underscored the delicate balance between aircraft performance, pilot experience, and environmental conditions, a balance that had been fatally disrupted in those final, fateful moments. Aftermath and compensation. In the days following the crash, Delta Air Lines swiftly took action to support the survivors. Recognizing the trauma and disruption caused by the accident, the airline offered each passenger $30,000 in compensation. Emails per hour, emphasizing that this payment came no strings attached. Passengers were assured that accepting the compensation would not waive their legal rights to pursue further claims. This gesture was intended to help with immediate expenses, such as medical bills, temporary accommodations, and lost belongings, while also demonstrating the airline's commitment to those affected. Beyond financial compensation, the accident had wider implications for the aviation industry. The incident prompted a re-evaluation of landing procedures in adverse weather conditions, particularly regarding unstable approaches and hard landings. Investigators and industry experts questioned whether existing pilot training programs adequately prepared crews for real-world challenges, particularly when transitioning from simulator training to live cockpit experience. Aviation authorities and regulatory bodies began reviewing training protocols for pilots handling difficult landings, with discussions surrounding the need for more frequent real-world exposure to challenging conditions rather than relying heavily on simulated environments. Additionally, airline safety departments reassessed their go-around policies, ensuring that pilots were more empowered to abort landings that did not meet safe approach parameters. For the passengers and crew who survived the terrifying ordeal, the emotional and physical recovery process had only just begun. Many would struggle with post-traumatic stress, and some faced long-term medical treatments for injuries sustained during the crash. While the compensation provided immediate relief, the true cost of the disaster extended far beyond financial figures. It had sparked industry-wide discussions about safety, training, and the ever-present risks of commercial aviation. Conclusion: the disaster of Delta Connection, Flight 4819, served as a stark reminder of the perils inherent in aviation and the critical importance of rigorous training and strict adherence to safety protocols. While modern aircraft are designed to withstand extreme conditions, this disaster highlighted how a combination of excessive descent rates, unstable approaches, and challenging weather can lead to catastrophic outcomes. Yet, amid the destruction, the survival of all 80 people on board was nothing short of remarkable. The resilience of the passengers, the swift response of the flight crew, and the immediate actions of emergency responders prevented this disaster from turning into a mass casualty event. Flight attendants navigated the chaos with courage, guiding disoriented passengers through the wreckage, while rescue teams fought the flames to ensure everyone made it out alive. In the aftermath, aviation authorities and airlines reassessed landing procedures, pilot training, and the challenges of real-world flight experience. The disaster became a pivotal case study in how split-second decisions, even in the most unpredictable conditions, can determine the difference between survival and tragedy. For those on board, the events of that snowy February day would forever be remembered as a disaster that tested their strength, but also proved the resilience of the human spirit. If you found this story gripping, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts. Let us know, what would you have done in this terrifying situation?